I'm still trying to figure out how Diddy gonna sit up there and make Biggie pay for his own funeral.
It was a lot of crazy stuff that was said in the Diddy documentary. But what about the part with Aubrey O'Day from Danity Kane?
Yeah, that was just insane. In 50 Cent's Netflix Diddy docuseries, Aubrey said that an attorney contacted her out of the blue because somebody said that they saw her in a room with Diddy and another person engaged in acts while she appeared to be completely out of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was crazy though, that I was thinking that she would just come and have her own allegations, because much of the thing she was just talking and she didn't really say anything about Diddy doing something to her.
Right.
But then it was in one of the later episodes and she's like, yeah, but I heard this, and then they read it out.
Yeah. And I mean, essentially the way it went was she did that, the attorney contacted her at the time, or actually they read it to her, because she said in the documentary, this was the first time she read it. And it was very powerful to hear her read the other person's words about what they say happened to her. And I mean, in a nutshell, the situation is that she was in there in the room having things done to her, but she, based on this other person's opinion, what they said was that it was for sure her and whatever. But Aubrey had no recollection of any of this. So from her perspective, before she got this word, it was like, okay, obviously Diddy had been creepy. She talked about how he showed, proof that he had sent her emails talking about he wanted to turn her out and all this stuff. But like, to get to the point where she never knew that it actually had happened, at least according to what she said there. And so now she's understanding that she too was one of the people who had, fallen victim to Diddy, right?
Yeah.
And it just presented this crazy situation.
Yeah, but could what she's saying be her protecting herself, right? The mental part is what I'm saying. Protecting herself in that sense, because
saying that she didn't know, in other words, that she didn't know that this had happened to her. That piece.
Some of that. But she's saying that if something like this happened, that there were times that you were blacked out, right? So you don't have to know exactly what happened, but you would know that, hey, I remember being blacked out one time and not knowing why, right? And then you would say, if somebody say, hey, this happened to you, and then you like, yeah, she like, I don't know if I was actually assaulted. You know what I'm saying? Just to be able to, function, I guess, and protect her own mental state.
Health.
Yeah.
Right, because there was that point, which is kind of this gray area, right? Where what if you didn't know that you had fallen prey to some predator like this, right? What if you legit just didn't actually know? And so because you don't know, it's at least consciously for sure, right?
Yeah,
because you don't know, then you're not operating and potentially maybe not even carrying the burdens that a person who is who's been through this is carrying. Yeah,
you don't have the trauma, you don't have all that stuff. But then you have the sense of, what if y'all were doing things and at times you were blacked out, right? Not, I'm saying like doing substances, right? Maybe you done whatever, maybe you drink and sometimes you black out and you don't know. And then you still get the news later on that, man, something happened to you one of those times that you were blacked out.
Right. So, I mean, that was just the idea of it all was just very like jarring to hear, because I wasn't expecting that. Honestly, I was just expecting the documentary to show mostly stuff we knew, maybe a couple of new things that we didn't know. But the stuff that happened in this documentary, there are a few things that are just crazy. Now, for it to be a full documentary, they did go on and talk about a lot of stuff. But, to get back to Aubrey, one of the other things that she said, which I thought was really, really important, is that she wasn't going to argue with what the person said or had told their attorney about whether it could be true or not true, because she didn't want for her situation to then somehow suggest that all of the other women who are telling and men telling what happened to them, that could possibly be false. She didn't want that on her head. And so she talked about the difficult position that she was in because of this.
Yes, operating in an imperfect world, right? Because if it was the way that it should be, then you could just come out and say, yeah, it didn't happen to me, or I don't know that it happened to me, but it may have happened to other people. But the thing is that if she come out and say that, then everybody going to use it. See, this didn't happen to this person, or, you know, this other person could be lying about that this thing happened. I mean, everybody is lying, right? So if something didn't happen to one person, a bunch of people who just wants to defend the action anyway are going to try to spread that across all the alleged victims.
And that's the thing. You know, we're at a point in time where finally women are and men, people who have been fallen prey to folks like this, that they are being believed, and folks do not want to, you know, potentially throw doubt on what has actually happened to a lot of people, you know, because somebody's story might not be 100% accurate, or they thought one thing, and, you know, all of that stuff. So that's where we are. But so many other things happened in this documentary.
Yep, a lot of crazy things were said. I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation via Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber.
So 50 Cent just somehow, they're calling it a 50 Cent documentary. I think he just paid. Like, so all the creative stuff, I think he didn't have any, well, he's not credited as having those parts in the documentary. And that's the thing to me. I think it's just, he paid money. He wanted this to be done, and he got better. He got good filmmakers to make it, because I think that the documentary was well put together for a documentary, not based on whether or not things are true or false, but
yeah, I agree. It was well put together. And as compared with some other documentaries that we've seen, or docuseries or whatever, I think that clearly the folks who put this together knew what they were doing. And just for the record, Alexandria Stapleton was the director, and 50 Cent was the executive producer. And of course, they had other people who contributed. But these are the two folks who kind of are taking responsibility for this documentary being out there. And also, we should just mention that, you know, of course, Diddy's attorneys, because at the time that this is being recorded, you know, Diddy is still in prison and he's serving his term right now. But you know, they basically sent cease and desist. They did not want this documentary out. And so, you know, the question becomes, though, as we move forward, whether it was, because you said the documentary was well made, and I agree, but, you know, is this a vendetta? Because we know 50 Cent, and, you know, he ain't really feeling Diddy like that. And so was this a vendetta? Is this the truth? Can it be both, right?
Yeah.
Can it be that, hey, look, you know, I don't like this dude, so I'm about to put out everything I can on him? So, you know, that's the kind of a question I think that we should sort of revisit as we just have, you know, the discussion. But
yeah, so there is one big question, but it was addressed by Diddy's attorneys, and they're like, basically, he stole this footage. He shouldn't have this footage, right? And I don't know all the particulars. There are some people who are making claims that Diddy didn't pay for the footage, but so somehow 50 Cent and whatever didn't pay for the footage. But my thing is that just because, we talked about this in another video, but just because someone paid for something to be done doesn't mean that they own the rights to it, unless that stuff is signed away. So if whoever you paid or whoever filmed that footage didn't have those rights signed over before or after they filmed it, then that person has the legal rights to sell and license or whatever that footage that they recorded, that they created. So that is how someone on 50 Cent's team could go over and get the rights to put it into a documentary and legally put it out on Netflix.
yeah, and in fact, where we talked about it was our review of Straight Outta Compton, and we were talking about some of the legal issues that they got into in the music business. So I'll link that video in the description, because it's dropping the same day as this video, but on another channel. So just be sure that you check that out too. But I also want to jump in here and let you guys know that if you love our deep dives into all of this stuff, we have deep dives on demand, and you right now can grab a holiday deep dive on demand deal. Normally they're $50 each, right? Whatever movie you want, we cover it for $50. But for a limited time, you can get 2 deep dive on demands for $75. You just pick any 2 films. We deliver the deep analysis, and you get executive producer credit. So again, this is a limited time holiday special, holiday season 2025. So don't miss out, because once it's over, it's over. And unfortunately, if you're watching at a later time, the sale might be over. So go to the description to get the link if you want to partake in that.
So, you mentioned Straight Outta Compton, right? And then I mentioned how I'm a huge Tupac fan, right? So, there have been rumors and stuff all along, since the 90s about Puff Daddy's involvement in Tupac's murder. And that was just brought out more on Front Street in this documentary because most people don't know about all of the rumors and the theories from back in the day, or even the stuff that's recently, ever since everyone has a podcast and everybody's going everywhere and doing interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but it was nice to have everything all in one place. And they pretty much dedicated almost an entire episode just to kind of talking about Tupac, that whole situation, East Coast, West Coast, just everything that was going on at that time. But the bottom line of what they say here is that essentially they don't implicate him exactly in Biggie's murder, talking about, Diddy. They don't implicate him in Biggie's murder, but what they say is that he really didn't want Biggie's murder to be solved because if it was solved, then it would kind of point to Tupac's murder and the connections that they allege that he had with the murder.
Yeah. So basically it was just like Diddy had connections to Crips up in LA, and then they were the ones who were out there in Vegas who killed Tupac. And basically he didn't even pay them because the hit was supposed to be for Tupac and Suge, and only one of them got hit. But, with that, he wasn't dead at the time because if you know anything, it took, quote, 6 or 7 days for him before he died. And I think
Tupac
the
died,
timeline in the documentary made it seem like almost immediately after, Keefe D was going over and basically trying to get the money. You know what I'm saying? So, but that supposedly $500,000 was the amount, which is kind of not a lot.
Yeah.
When you think about, in this crazy that it's not solved because, like just very busy and, there's jokes and stuff about that. One particular Chris Rock. But yeah, that's to not get paid after you do that too.
So do you think that it's plausible that he had something to do with it? Like,
so the problem with me is that, right, it's, never let a good, what do they call it? The quote. Never let a good
controversy or a good scandal.
Yeah, a good scandal go to waste or whatever, right? And that's how they positioned it in this docuseries, is that because of the whole thing with Orlando Anderson and the the chain and all that, and they basically, it's on footage. Everybody knows that the event actually happened where they whooped Orlando, right? And then they're like, this is the greatest opportunity to do it. Like you didn't need a cover. I guess you needed a cover, but if you just gonna do a hit, you don't need the cover. And it just happens that this coincidence of this event happening is, that kind of muddies it.
So a lot of the evidence, and I put evidence in air quotes, that they give is kind of circumstantial, right? These things happen, those things happen, because they were pointing out how, like, at the time, Diddy had drivers who were coming from being flown into Las Vegas and that area during that time. And the implication was that the drivers were going to be there so that when they decided to do the hit, that, that there could be drivers available to do whatever needed to be done related to this hit. And it doesn't kind of make sense on why you wouldn't just not have drivers where you are. Why would your drivers need to come all the way from New York to the West Coast? Right. All of this stuff. But if you think about capitalizing on tragedy, that's really kind of what Diddy took every opportunity, along the way. I mean, they do go into his history, like how did he get famous? They had one of his childhood friends who used to live in the same I guess building, house, whatever it was, with 2 units in it, that was in there and was talking during the documentary and giving insights on him even as a young boy. And one of the things that you see is that as he's becoming famous, there was an issue where some people got stampeded at a party that he had put in, or at an event that he put together, and some people were killed as a result of that. And But that was the thing that put him on the map, that started to help him blow up as Puff Daddy's parties and stuff on the East Coast before he was, Diddy or anybody that we knew before he was really huge. And so that was a tragedy. Then again, we see him propelled forward even more after Biggie. Well, during the East Coast, West Coast stuff, right? People are looking back and forth, and he was losing that battle as far as, people liked the West Coast better. I mean, obviously the East Coast liked, the folks from New York better. But I'm just saying, as far as the country is concerned, he wasn't looking as good in that situation, especially after Tupac was murdered.
Right. Being from where I'm from the South, it's Tupac all day. All that East Coast stuff wasn't a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So then when Biggie got murdered, though, it was like, suddenly he can make, Missing You, the song or whatever. That was huge right after. He gets to look like the morning best friend and like he's going to do all of the right things. But does he, but he capitalized every time there was a scandal. And I think that was what he was kind of trying to do with this too. Because a lot of the footage in this documentary came from what he himself had commissioned to be filmed.
The footage of him or just the footage in general?
The footage of Diddy, right?
Yeah.
Because they have some new secret footage, right? Which is right before Diddy gets arrested. He has been recording himself behind the scenes. So the allegations are there. They've already raided his houses and stuff. So they know that the other shoe is going to drop, that he's probably going to be indicted, right? It just hasn't yet happened. But he's in New York and he's recording himself because clearly, he's planning to capitalize on that later on. And, they say that he was trying to put his own be able to tell his own life story at some point. And so, all along he has always filmed himself and stuff. So this is no different, but yeah. So he capitalized on on Tupac's murder. He kind of was able to turn that around, but for a while he was looking bad. So to the question of could he possibly have been involved? I mean, I say possibly as far as direct involvement, but no doubt, like the climate that was created by the people involved in wanting to hype it up helped to really for both Tupac and Biggie, to be, murdered at a young age.
But he always had a plan to have all the attention. That's why he was dancing in all the videos. You know what I'm saying? So like with the people driving out, and that nobody else is involved in that, right? So you drove out there for nothing because somebody else was going to do the thing that needed to be done. It brings up questions. That don't even make sense. Why are you telling me something that's irrelevant to the events that actually happened, right? So, but then you do have Keefe D who say he was there. I ain't gonna say I'm there when something like that happened, right? So he had like a proffer and he was basically trying to get off on, murder charge, right? So he's like, I know stuff about Tupac.
But he thought that because he had the proffer and that the agreement would cover him so he could say whatever he wanted to say and not be used against him. Exactly. That's what he thought.
Right. That's what he thought. But it's also that that doesn't mean it's true that he said this stuff, right? Just like Diddy needed attention. This guy wanted attention and he wanted to get off of that case, right? And when the attention part is after, once everybody got a podcast, microphone and start interviewing folks, he was going around, right? And that's what really got him. He's going around everywhere talking about how, we took out Tupac. For the attention and whatever they were paying him, for those interviews and stuff.
Yeah.
But so I don't know, was he involved in this? Because there was just some stuff about basically being involved in a documentary. I don't remember exactly. Somebody go to the comments and tell us about Keefe D in some documentary that I think the courts had actually got involved in because he was, profiting off of this stuff. But whatever, I don't even
but people do a lot of stuff for attention, money, fame, notoriety, all of that. And so we always have to kind of consider that as we evaluate, what happened. But what I also say is that I feel that a disservice was done to both Biggie and Tupac for not solving their murders at the time, because obviously the further you get away from the event, the more difficult it's going to be to solve those crimes. And in a way, even though like better late than never, you know, somebody is being prosecuted for Tupac's murder, everybody who was involved did not get their day in court, so to speak, because, you know, others like Orlando Anderson and stuff, like he died, you know, and other people who could have been involved are not around and stuff. And I mean, look, we're decades later. Like, that's unacceptable when somebody's life is taken. So there's that piece of it to me that's just the human component that is just crazy too, you know.
But so even after this, right, Tupac got killed and stuff, and not even a year later, you know, this whole stuff happened. Tupac was saying what he was saying about the East Coast and everything, and people legit hated Bad Boy and folks on the East Coast, right? Because all this stuff, you know, is fashioned after gang life, right? That's just legit. You know, you have the names, you have the signs, you have all that stuff, right? But, you know, after that, you go to L.A. Diddy went to L.A. with Biggie, and they was partying and stuff, trying to release his album, whatever the title was. I don't even know what the title of the album was supposed to be. You went there and was basically throwing it in everybody's faces after everybody believes, at the time, everybody believed
that he had something
to do with it.
Right. That was and I can't say the word on the street, but that was like the general sentiment. You know, I'm in Chicago at the time, but that was how people felt about it. When it happened, people were like, well, you know, Biggie had something to do with it. Because even if, now that doesn't make it legitimate that he had something to do with it, but you see two groups fighting and then somebody from one of the groups is offed. Well, automatically you're going to think that somebody from the opposing group has something to do with it. And who was that opposing group leader? Diddy, whether by his own hands or not, right? But it was less than a year later, like you were talking about.
Yeah, and you went over there and they started, you know, you trying to party and flex and stuff, you know, because I'm not going over there. If something like that, everybody think I had something to do with something like this, I'm not going over there. As Cheri say, you didn't believe fat meat was greasy. Or maybe you did, right? But Biggie then got killed, right? He got killed.
Yeah. And, you know, it was crazy because there were people that talked about in the documentary how he didn't want to go. He had plans to be in Europe, to fly out to Europe. And those plans were canceled, allegedly by Diddy, so that he could have a party for this album and promotions for the album that was coming out there on the West Coast, you know. And so that's just crazy, and it's crazy talk. And so then, you know, of course, their car is ambushed and, you know, he's killed. Biggie is killed.
And then we get to the thing of the claim that Diddy tried to recoup the funeral expenses.
Man, that's just, but that's low down. But you know, okay, so before we get to that piece, let me just set the stage and say, at this time, you would, as just a person who doesn't know any of them and is consuming the media, consuming the records, you seeing him in all the videos, you know what Diddy's role is. But at the same time, it was made like they were best friends. Diddy and Biggie were best friends. Like, you know, that's as a person watching and seeing the videos and looking at the interviews, you would think they were best friends. That was how it was presented.
And you know how, like with Drake and Kendrick Lamar, everybody just took a side, right? That happened back then, right?
Right.
So like everybody I know, they took the side of the West Coast, Tupac, especially after he got killed. You know what I'm saying? And then the thing was, once Biggie got killed, then it kind of, you know, I guess with everybody,
it got real.
It got real, and you kind of wasn't all the way on one side once that happened. If you're not necessarily from those places, right?
Right.
But so then when he put out that song, Missing You, then I'm jamming it. I'm like, dang, this is jamming and it's sad and all this, you know.
And he brought everybody together, and, you know, he was there. And see, that's the thing too. He was there when it happened to Biggie. And so it's almost like he could have died too. So he managed to not get killed. It's just interesting to me, though, that him and Suge were there at the time it happened. Suge Knight was with Tupac. Biggie was with Diddy. And nothing happened. Well, you know, they weren't seriously injured or injured at all. But the other person is dead. That never, I don't know, that never sat well with me to begin with for either of those situations. Not to point fingers, but it just was kind of like, that's crazy. But anyhow, so he benefited from it. And then think about this, right? With that whole song, because we talk about this part too, you know, so it is from a song that Sting wrote, right? You know, that, and what's the actual name of the song Sting wrote? Is it Every Breath You Take? Is that it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's Every Breath You Take by Sting. So obviously they sampled that song But he didn't pay Sting. Yeah, it was by the police. Okay, so Sting was the one who wrote it, but the police was the one who sang the song. His group at the time. So he didn't pay.
Well, why was Sting up there on stage with him?
Because he paid then, right? Sting is just about his money. But what Diddy thought he was going to do was not pay for the sample, basically steal it. And maybe he thought he wasn't going to get sued, kind of like how the gospel artists assume they're not going to get sued when they steal the song. That's a mainstream song because of the content of the song. Maybe that's what he was thinking. But then he did get sued. And not to go off into that conversation, but it might not have been Sting personally, right? It could have been the companies that manage all of this are like, oh no, look at all the money this song made. We getting our part. And in fact, I think he's still paying them. Sting talk about how he get a check every quarter, still off of this song, which was huge
publishing.
at the time.
That's how that works.
Yeah. So yes.
You better get a check for life on a song that always gets played.
But the song was huge. It helped to rehab, at the time, I think we still calling him Puff Daddy, right? It helped to rehab his image and make him seem like not as much of the bad guy. People who didn't like him before were like, because so much has been lost. Biggie has been lost. Tupac has been lost. This is, let's stop the violence kind of, so the fans were willing to kind of give another chance to Diddy, and that helped to rehab him, in that moment.
Yeah. But so they say, I believe, was it Kirk Burrow who said that, the co-founder, who said that Diddy didn't pay for the funeral, and he went around. You know how everybody just assumed that, it was paid for
because he was talking.
By
he
Bad
was
Boy
like,
and Diddy.
he gonna have the biggest funeral ever, and they took his casket through the streets, and it was a huge funeral, and people came out and they mourned him. We saw how that was done in the documentaries about Biggie, and also in the movie Notorious. We get a feel for that, and so it really was huge. But he took that money. Well, he didn't pay. Let me just say, allegedly he didn't pay. That is the claim. And so if he didn't pay, then what would happen? The person responsible who done signed for it would probably have been his mother, or his wife. And it's left on the family, which means that it's put on them. It's put on him. Well, you done made Biggie pay for his own daggone funeral.
Yeah, but what they said was it was recouped. So basically he charged it to the artist's account, right? So the thing is, when you have a record deal, all the expenses, your partying, your cars, your drivers, your videos, all that back in the day, all that stuff is getting, they're keeping a tally of all that stuff, right? And then when it's time to pay you for your portions of whatever you own, your points off the album and stuff, they take that stuff out first. So that's why they go so long without getting paid. So he's saying that they put it on that ledger and basically saying that, Biggie, the artist, got to pay it back, But the estate for Biggie came out and they claimed that that's not what happened.
So what did they say happened?
They say that, I don't know who they say paid, but they say that it didn't happen that way. So I'm guessing they're saying that Puffy did pay for it. But my thing is too, when it's the estate, does the estate, especially 25 years later, know? I'm pretty sure they can go back and look.
They may know, but we also don't know what deals are in play. We just don't know. We just don't know any of this. And actually, Biggie's mother recently passed away, right? Wasn't that just this year? Yes, she died in February of just this year, and Valletta Wallace. And so, this documentary and all this stuff comes out after the fact. And, so she's also not here to answer. Yeah. And maybe his wife, Faith, might know or something like that. But, again, no, but I don't think Faith has made a comment about this documentary at this point. And neither have a lot of people, publicly commented. Of course, you have the usual suspects who are going to comment on everything publicly, folks like Dame Dash and, other people who are always going to say something about everything.
And there's some people who are waiting for a podcast to pay them for the interview to talk about this stuff.
For those of you who don't know, you should visit axiom.app And you'll be able to look at all of the recent videos across all of our channels. And I'm putting that on the screen right now just so y'all can see it and see what it looks like. Because there are a ton of videos that are over there. And also, I think that there are at least about 100 exclusive videos that are available for our Patreon members and our YouTube members. So, you know, if you're interested in more of our content, as I've seen many of you binge watching, be sure to check those things out. So yeah, I mean, but this is, I mean, this whole thing, even though it's remixing some of the stuff that we were aware of there, I mean, that was new. I had never heard that potentially Diddy had made Biggie's family or Biggie pay for his services. I mean, that's just that's diabolical, yes, as they say. Another thing I wanted to let you guys know is about our mailing list, because a lot of you guys are missing videos because you're not getting your YouTube notifications. And so we fixed this. You just need to subscribe to our mailing list for personalized notifications on all of our videos as they're released across all of our channels. And you'll get an email, and that's basically it. The link is in the description so you can subscribe, but make sure you do that. But the thing is, they were calling them the secret tapes, right? So this video of Diddy as he's expecting to be arrested and charged or whatever, right? When he's in New York before he is arrested. How did 50 Cent or, you know, how did they get this footage? And we speculated, but when they asked 50 Cent and the director, neither of them would say. And 50 Cent was like, well, you know, journalistic integrity, and this is our sources, blah, 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 right? But when they got sued, well, not sued, but when they had paperwork and the cease and desist that was put out, Alexandria Stapleton came out and she said, she made a statement and she said, look, we got this footage through legal means. We own the rights to it. Point blank and period. So you had a speculation about how you think that they got the footage since they won't tell us.
Yeah, it's basically what I said at the beginning. They didn't pay for it, and whoever creates it owns it. So then they could sell it to whoever they want to. Right? I'm telling y'all, if you pay somebody to follow you around with a camera, you don't own that footage. Until
you pay for it and you got the paperwork that says you own it and have all rights.
That's probably what happened with the Kanye West documentary, right? Mm-hmm. You know, he think he making his own documentary, but you ain't signing them rights over from them tapes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that footage of him in 2024 or whatever before the thing is worthless. To me, not worthless in the sense of monetarily, in the scheme of the documentary.
Yeah.
It made the documentary worse, right? So the parts when, you know, you got the flow of the documentary, it's good, right? The first 2 episodes is just like basically the history of and the come up of
Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah,
yes.
And I'm like, dang, this is detailed. It's sharing everything that happened, you know what I'm saying, in one cohesive way. And then every once in a while, they break into 2004 and they sitting around talking about his case. I don't care.
Well, okay, so here's what I think about it. The main things that I gleaned from that footage was, number one, he was planning to monetize it because that's obvious, right? Why else are you recording this?
Yeah.
The second thing is the footage being put in here was to kind of, I feel like, besmirch his character, if you could, anymore. I mean, we already seen footage of other stuff. Like, we seen the video of him and Cassie in that hallway. So, you know, but there was a point where he's talking to his attorneys and he makes this statement and he starts talking about propaganda. So he's basically telling his attorneys, like, look, we're losing in the court of public opinion. I need y'all to get y'all heads together because I'm paying you money. And we need an expert, somebody in PR, an expert, somebody who understands propaganda. Now, you hate to hear those words, but essentially, whether you put it in those words or not, anybody who is a media mogul, anybody who is in the game of keeping people engaged is engaging in putting propaganda out.
Anybody who is in that position, even if they're right and innocent, they're going to do that same thing. I need to get the message out.
Right.
By any means.
Yeah.
Right. And y'all need to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. And so.
And you just don't hire the folks who like R. Kelly had, who's talking about plausible deniability
and foolishness like that. So like when you say it's worthless, the reason is that to me, that didn't mean much, even though it looks bad, it sounds bad. It didn't mean much because anybody in this situation with this much money and this much in their life on the line and facing prison at the time, like he could basically be in prison the rest of his life with the charges that he potentially would have been looking at. So, that didn't mean much to me because anybody who's fighting for their life and has the money to be able to do it well is going to say stuff like this and do stuff like this. So whatever, you doing what anybody else would do. It just looked bad, right? And which is why they put it in there. So that was the one thing that happened. The second thing that came from that is there's this part where he's been out. And is that part of that where he was out and about and he had gone amongst the people? Oh, yeah, it's because this is in that same time period. So he's called himself, he's like, I've been amongst the people. So he went to the streets. He went back, to where he came from in New York. And he's on the streets talking to people and stuff like that because he's looking bad in the public. And, people like that need to feel like they still got love coming from somewhere, right? So he's on the streets, he's talking to people and still showing that he's got this star power and this magnetism and stuff like that. So when he gets back in the car, he makes the statement like, "Ooh, I need hand sanitizer because I've been amongst the people. I need a bath." Ooh, that kind of thing. And I don't remember if they said how many people or whatever, but for whatever reason in my mind, 150, 125 people he interacted with. Now, in the time of post-COVID or during, because this is 24, right? It's COVID, COVID had happened a few years before. Everybody who got good sense would be hyper vigilant in my mind about physical contact with a bunch of people and stuff like that and, interacting with folks.
Even without it, though, I ain't never hugged 150 people, right?
Touching hands with them.
Yeah, let's say it was maybe like at least even 20 people, right? 30 people, 50. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That people got perfume, cologne, and all this other stuff. Man, I need to go and do something after I didn't interact with all these people. And I guess that's why I'm not famous and stuff. But if I was, I probably would feel the same way. Dang, I don't know where all these people been. And
it sounds bad.
Yeah, it sounds bad. But see, I think it's 50 being what everybody say he is, petty, right? That's it, right? So now, you like, hey, look at these crazy things he's saying, and people gonna just take those bits and be like, yeah, look, he's talking about propaganda and he's talking about washing his hands and stuff, right? But now, and like, I stole your footage. Even though it could be legal, I'm putting it in air quotes. I stole your footage, and now you can't monetize that too. So you put out a documentary with the similar footage of that time period. It's like, bro, come on. This, we had a documentary about this. You know what I'm saying? And now, some parts you really can't.
Right.
Put in
Not
there.
only did I stop you from monetizing it, but now I have monetized my hatred for you. Even though, to be fair, I did watch an interview where 50 Cent is like, I don't have a beef with him. He does say that he think that back in the day, Diddy was trying to buy him some clothes, and he think he was trying to figure out whether he, was open, and with that direction, right? But, in today's world, it's just that, he wanted to make the documentary. He made this documentary. There is no doubt in my mind that he clearly has disdain for this man, but he's putting it under the guise of people need to know what, terrible people do. And this, but that is also true, which is what makes this situation more complicated because I think anybody with good sense looking at it knows his motives are not pure, but at the same time, even though his motives may not have been 100% pure, what comes out on the other end is letting people know what actually did happen if indeed the statements being made here are true. But yeah, but there was another thing that happened. There were 2 jurors who appeared in this documentary. And so what were the jurors talking about? Because it was one that was a black woman and a man who was...
Yeah, it was some man, and he was kind of talking about, it was just unbelievable. And that's basically why some of those charges, came back not
They were just
guilty.
too wild to believe.
And I'm like, wait, what? And I think it was mentioned in the vein of like the Kid Cudi stuff. And I'm like, wow, I don't know why that seems wild, but, whatever. But so it seemed that maybe the ones who are willing to talk, or it was just strategic to feature the ones who said that what they said. But
well, this is where we get like to talk about some of the biggest cases. And the biggest case of the last century, with pretty much no arguments, was like O.J. Simpson, right? Or one of the biggest anyway, if you don't consider it the biggest. It was the biggest, though. And we did find out later that pretty much everybody associated with that case, including many jurors, did write books about it. And they were thinking about the books that they would be writing while they were on that jury for, I think it was like 8 months or something like that. And so this is not new. So now that you know the ropes, if you get on a big case like this, people are thinking about how they will monetize it. We also saw this with the YSL jury, right? Because the YSL trial did happen. And we saw them attempt to kind of come out
like
and be able to monetize it.
Yeah,
a few of them. You know, they try to have a YouTube channel. They tried to come out and start talking, but unfortunately their timing was bad.
And they were talking about, we don't want to talk about the case.
Yeah.
Like, what? You need to go over everything to everybody who wanted to know about.
So the motive was more of like, we're just trying to get on and we want to be able to monetize it too. Their timing wasn't good and they weren't giving up the goods on what we as an audience would really want to know. So that kind of crashed and burned after a few episodes and it was done with, right? But and then there was another part that made me wonder, like, okay, will what their appearance potentially allow reasons for Diddy's attorneys to come back and say that he didn't receive a fair trial, or that there was some type of misconduct or something was going on with the jury? Like, were they discussing things ahead of time? Because the jury is not supposed to talk about the case until they get the case and they're deliberating.
Yeah, one of the things that the woman said was that, they would hear rumors and stuff about, oh, this happened in trial or whatever. And it sounded like she said that she was saying that, no, that didn't happen, which to me is like, that's talking about the case. You know what I'm saying? But I think they give a lot of leeway when it comes to things like that. So when you bring those up, that, the court,
it would have to be really substantial.
Yeah, I really think so. But he has some good, high-paid, high-powered attorneys. Yes. You know what I'm saying? So they could probably
a few of whom were on the YSL case.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure they can come up with some stuff, and hey, crazier things have happened.
Yes. So in your mind, was this a hit piece?
Yeah, I think they went into it with a goal. We gonna show how bad Diddy is. So, and I guess that's kind of the definition of a hit piece. Yeah.
And I think I agree. It was a hit piece, definitely. But the question in my mind is, do I believe it's true? Yeah. And if I had to rate it, just my own personal beliefs, I'm not saying you should believe it or anything like that. My own personal beliefs is, I think probably at least about 75% of what we heard was true. And many of the speculations seemed like reasonable speculations, even based upon the circumstantial evidence at the time. Kind of like something seems, weird, something seems fishy, or things that just don't add up, stuff like that. So I would say, I believed about maybe 75% of what I had heard and seen and was discussed on there. And then the worst things are things that we see him actually do, like, what he did to Cassie and that whole, like, there's nothing you can do to explain that away. Nothing. Unless you said that was, in case you say that was a scene from a movie.
No, so you had the gigolo who basically was talking about one time she ran away and just came back, basically, and he brought her back like nothing. She's acting like nothing happened, right? And it like some S&M sort of stuff to me, where it could, I'm not saying that this is what it is, I'm saying that it could be argued that is just them, quote, role playing. That's the play, right? You go, you get, you fake like you running off, or you run off and you get beat down, get dragged back, and here you go. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
Because they was into some wild
some
stuff.
People act crazy. You
according
know what
to what, if
and I watched Grey's, whatever that stupid movie
50 Shades of Grey.
I watched the first one, I think 50 Shades of Grey, right? Like, that's, I don't know. But some people think that you shouldn't bring out an argument that could be used, because somebody could use the argument, but hey.
I mean, we just talking over here, and if they want to use the argument, whatever, they got to put it together. But at any rate, that's the question. But another thing that you and I talked about as we were watching all 4 episodes of this docuseries, so 4 hours of our life here, is that everybody that appeared in here had a reason that they themselves admitted to want to say something bad or negative.
Yeah.
Everybody.
I don't know about everybody, but
well, I mean, or that okay, let me just rephrase that. Everybody had at least one negative experience that could be viewed as motive to not want to say nice things about Sean Diddy Combs. Let me put it that way. So, but I like that in a way because it's like saying, here's the good, here's the bad, here's what I believe. And it's a more balanced thing as opposed to seeming like you don't have any kind of beef with this person or that there weren't negative experiences and stuff like that. But
what was going on with Eric Sermon? Eric Sermon's like, he stole my girl who wasn't my girl. It was just my friend. And then, one time, I was gonna beat him up. He
knew he couldn't beat nobody up, and then I
told him to get in the car. We drove around the corner. He played Biggie album.
It was the weirdest thing. I don't know. Maybe that was just edited really bad. It was just ridiculous how it sounded in there. I was like, wait, what?
I was like, what happened around the corner?
Well, did you punch him? Did he punch you before it got played? Or were you just so like, oh my gosh, this is the best song I ever heard that you forgot about, the tension in the moment? I don't know.
I know. He just turned on Juicy and you was like, dang, hold up, man. I was going to whoop your ass. But
this is, all right, Oh, this is why you was tapping on my window? Because it happened when he said that he was with the girl in the car who was Diddy's girl at the time, previously his friend or girlfriend, one or the other, unclear. And Diddy's tapping on his window in the car, and that this happened after that. But anyway, so for those of you in the audience, did you guys watch it? We sent out a poll and we asked, and at the time we asked, about only 25% of y'all had seen it, but have more of you all seen it? Did you see it? Do you feel it was worth the watch? And I guess we should talk about that. I think it's worth the watch because I just think it's good to see all of that. But it is 4 hours long. I mean, so you could put it on. Wow.
I don't know. Like I said, to me, I think it was the first 2 episodes, right?
Yeah.
Because, I do the music thing, y'all. So don't come at me because I want to see the music part. But that's it. Like his come up in the business and Bad Boy, all that stuff that was happening. And I think maybe some parts of the third one is some Tupac stuff, I think.
But you're going to hear a lot of stuff you already knew. So like if you're coming in here like expecting this to be all new news, then you're going to be disappointed because it's a replaying, rehashing, retelling of a lot of things.
Yeah, so the people who live through things and who were consuming the stuff, I don't know why they just always be like, I knew everything. Yeah. Yeah, like.
But there were things I didn't know. And I mean, I feel like I have kept up pretty well with the storyline throughout the years. And I mean, the Aubrey O'Day situation, like that was new. That was new news to me.
Yeah,
and
but
other nuggets that happened.
Let's say it's 90%, but some people like, I know most of the stuff. So it's like, but why did you watch it? You should have known that you was going to know the stuff.
Yeah, well,
That ain't even the purpose of documentaries, is to make sure that everybody didn't know everything.
And the one thing I always keep in mind, too, is that the documentary really should be able to stand alone later on for future generations, whoever's watching later. And so because I've lived through those times, there are things that I know. Of course, there will be things I know. But what about the person 20 years, 30 years from now who wanted to kind of know what happened? The way y'all might go back and, like we talked about this, how the young folks who might not have even been alive in the 90s are going back and you're doing think pieces and talk pieces about what happened in the 90s. And you're solely basing it on your opinion through the lens of 2025 and articles and different things and whatever people wrote and documented at the time. This is why we have to be documenting and telling our own stories.
And I think a legit criticism would be that important things were left out, if you think there are important things that were left out.
Yeah.
If you made it this far, type juicy in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now. And also be sure to visit axiom.app where you'll find all of our recent videos in one place with links to them back on YouTube so you can watch them here. In addition, you can buy our merch there. You can do everything you need to do with Axiom Amnesia at axiom.app. So be sure to visit there.